Hello everybody, Mr. D here with an exciting episode of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Hand Sanitizer. Pass it on please. Today we are going to talk about Henry Purcell. As you see from the years, he was born well before Bach and Handel. He died probably a decade or two after they were born. So he was an English composer of what we call the mid-Baroque period. And I wanted to once again remind you that the Baroque period is a very long period. It's 150 years. So when you talk about Baroque period, there is a early Baroque period, mid-Baroque period, late Baroque period, and both Bach and Handel belong to the late Baroque period. So Baroque period is 150 years. In his youth, he was a chorister at the Chapel Royal in London, later worked at the Westminster Abbey, writing anthems and other church music. He wrote a lot of instrumental pieces like sonatas. So let's listen to that. Of course, we can hear harpsichord and orchestra, but Baroque trumpet, let's just go over here for a moment. Wow, that looks a lot longer than what we have seen nowadays as trumpet. And so, brass instruments in the Baroque period didn't have valves. Those are those buttons that you push on the trumpet and the French horn and the tuba, so you can change pitch. So they haven't been invented. So basically the trumpet was a very, very, very long tubing wrapped around. They could play notes only by changing the notes with their lips. As you notice, maybe in the video, I will play you the video, the player covers there are a couple of holes that can help. Adjusting the pitch, much like you would do on a clarinet or an oboe. It's very interesting. I just wanted to show you. So let's go back to Purcell. There are a few important things that I would like to tell you about that. We have discussed the organ and harpsichord, so he was a very good player. And now let's listen to something that he wrote. What do you think that is? So, I don't know if you could hear in the beginning, I'll point to the exact place where the ornament happens. Okay, so when you hear that, that is different than a trill. A trill has many repetition. The type of ornament that is used is called a mordent. So it's a very useful term for you to add to your vocabulary. And when you do only one turn, it's called a mordent. It kind of looks like a squiggly line on top of the note and means only one turn. Okay, let's move on. Now, he also wrote some of the earliest English operas. This is actually a very famous music, the Lament of Dido. She was the queen of Carthage, and she was abandoned by the Trojan hero Aeneas. Why is this important? It's because of a very, very specific example of a ground bass. Now, you might think that this means a minced fish. However, a ground bass is when the chromatic bass line is repeated throughout the song. So let's listen to that. As you see, the bass line is moving chromatically step by half step by half step, and then it turns here. So let's explore a little bit more about the ground bass. Okay, do you see that? Now listen to this again. This time, the notes that you're supposed to follow are with red. Something that you may remember from the previous lessons was about the Passacaglia, the piece for the organ, which the bass line was kept the same and the keyboard at the feet, and the player was masterfully improvising on top of it. So this is really cool. I really like pieces like Passacaglias and ground bass. They're pretty cool. Let's move on. So the idea about a string orchestra was brought across from France in the 17th century. So Purcell wrote numerous pieces for strings, including this famous rondo. You may ask, what is a rondo? Rondo simply means circle. So the bass line would be played usually by a cello and harpsichord. The harpsichord will improvise the chords. And here is another important thing to remember. This type of bass line is called continuo. Okay, let's listen to that and we'll get a little bit more into continuo. So let's explore a little bit more about the continuo. So the continuo uh, there are two requirements to have a basso continuo. That is one low instrument, one bass instrument that is capable of sustaining notes, like a cello, double bass, or bassoon, and one instrument that can make chords. Those at that time, remember, piano wasn't invented yet, were harpsichord, organ, or a lute. A lute kind of looks like a guitar, is played like a guitar. So there are two requirements. Remember that. It's gonna appear on a quiz. Two requirements. One bass instrument, low instrument that is capable of sustaining a line, and one instrument that can make chords. Now, usually, as I mentioned, the harpsichord would improvise the chords, but they still needed a little bit of a guidance. So the composer will put these numbers underneath the music to help the players improvise. So, as you see, there are notes with blue, notes with black, and numbers and sharps in red. So what the player during the Baroque period would get the bass line, the notes in black, and the instructions in red. Based on those instructions, the player would improvise the chords above in blue. They were not written out. They'll make them up, and it's possible that every player could do something different. Like a secret code for musicians. Let's go back to Purcell. He wrote numerous songs. The Dido's Lament, maybe I say it wrong, Dido's Lament, has a repeated ground bass line. Now, decided to stop, not to talk over the song, but this is an example of a song where we have a singer and we have a harpsichord player, and they would get a figured bass, they will get the bass line, just as you see. I don't know why they didn't put the numbers, but the player in their part will get the numbers and they will improvise the right hand. So this is pretty important. Let's review. We talked about the ground bass. This is the stepwise motion in the bass line that repeats over and over, just like Passacaglia. And we talked about the Continuo, which there are two requirements: one low sustaining instrument and one instrument capable of producing chords. And third, we talked about figured bass, which is the bass line with the numbers that provide a secret code for the harpsichord player to be able to improvise their right hand. Now, let's listen to this piece. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. A quick review of the words that I will be asking on the test. Either watch the video again or find them online. Mordent. Mordent is an ornament. It has only one turn. We have ground base. That's not a minced fish. This is a motion in the bass line that keeps repeated over and over, much like Passacaglia. Then you have the Continuo, which has two requirements. One low sustaining instrument like cello, bass or bassoon, and one instrument that can make chords like harpsichord, organ, or a lute. Then we have figured bass, which means you have a bass line with numbers underneath which provide a secret code so the harpsichord player can improvise their right hand. Improvise means make it up. And you have a rondo, which means circle. In rondo, you always repeat the beginning section after you introduce something new. I hope you enjoyed that. Bye.